Welcome to something short and sweet. Today, on the Book of Rus, so closely associated with the upcoming holiday of Shavuos. It can be said that the Book of Rus is a book of people, their decisions, and the consequences of those decisions. We open the book and we find a man by the name of Elimelech. He's a leader. He's fabulously wealthy. The people are coming to him for sustenance at a time of a famine. He's conflicted. He doesn't want to lose his financial standing. And he chooses to abdicate his responsibility. He leaves his people. He leaves Eretz Israel. And as a consequence, he dies. His sons, Machlon and Kilyon, undoubtedly are shaken by their father's passing. And they undoubtedly are forced to reconsider his decision. Maybe they would go back. They decide to stay, and they compound their sins by marrying Moabite women. And ultimately, they have the same fate as their father. Naomi, the wife of Elimelech, is now thrust into the decision-making role. She's old. At this point, she's penniless. It would be so much easier for her just to stay and live out her life. She decides that she's going to go back to Eretz Israel, go back to her people, and thereby she sets up other people to make pivotal decisions. Her daughters-in-law, the wives of Machlon and Kilyon, the Moabite princesses, have to decide whether they were going to follow her. It's an incredibly emotional decision. Orpah loves her mother-in-law deeply and has a desperate desire to follow her. And yet, there is part of her that wants to reject Naomi and reject everything that she stands for. She decides to turn back. And thereby she is canonized for all time, for eternity, as having turned her back. Her name is Orpah, which means back of the neck. Turned her back on her mother-in-law, on her people, on her God. She ultimately would beget Goliath. She became the mother of Goliath, who would go to war with Klal Yisrael and with the God of Israel. Rus, in the exact same position, made the opposite choice. In doing so, she utters those beautiful words that ring out throughout history. Amech ami, ve'elokayach Elokai. Your people is my people. Your God is my God. And Rus becomes Ima Shel Malchus. She becomes the mother of the Davidic dynasty. They go back to Eretz Israel. A relative of Naomi is faced with a decision whether he would marry Rus. It's a big halachic issue. Is a Moavia permitted to a Ben Yisrael? He decides not to. He's called in scripture Ploni Almoni, Mr. No Name. He's the Jewish John Doe. He cannot be named in scripture. Why? Is he so bad? And after all, there are evil people in the Torah and in Tanakh, and they have names. Esav is named, Yishmael's name, Nimrod is named, etc., etc. Why not Ploni Almoni? So one of the Gera Rebbes, he says so beautifully, it's not because he was evil. He wasn't. Didn't have to marry her. But scripture is emphasizing that here you have a man who had a great opportunity and he squandered it. And therefore, he became a nobody. He amounted to absolutely nothing. In stark contrast to Ploni Almoni is Boaz. He's a leader. He's an elderly man, great sage. He needs to grapple with whether he's going to marry this young girl Rus, she's a Moavia. It's the same issue. Undecided halacha at that point. She's a young girl. He's going to marry this young woman. He hesitates. And Rus and Naomi, they force the issue. And in a very critical moment, highlight of that story, he decides that he's going to take her. And he becomes Abba Shel Malchus. He becomes Abba Shel Mashiach. So, my friends, what about you? And what about me? We see from here that our choices, our critical choices, are no less consequential than they once were. For the Medrash tells us the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, that in the past, a person would do a mitzvah, and a Navi would record it for eternity. Questions the Medrash, what about today? When one does a mitzvah, who is there to take note of it? Says Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, nobody other than Eliyahu Hanavi is writing up all the great choices, the mitzvos that a person makes. And it's signed and it's sealed by Mashiach and the Ribono Shel Olam himself. What does this mean? Eliyahu Hanavi is tasked. He's been employed by the Ribono Shel Olam to bring about messianic times, to point out imperfection and to bring about correction in the nation and in the individual, to point out imperfection and to bring about correction. Eliyahu Hanavi, for thousands of years, has been going around Klal Yisrael and going through history and pushing for the Geula. And he has pen in hand, and he's looking for the great decisions that you and I make. These decisions are epic. These decisions are redemptive. We live in an age, the last 8 months, where Jews have been making major decisions. Jews have been stepping up, many of them literally putting their lives on the line. Now is the time not to just relax. Now is the time to accept the role, each of us, where we were placed, to accept the role, to capitalize it. Eliyahu Hanavi is pushing us to do so. And when we do, it will be confirmed by nobody less than Mashiach and nothing less than HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. May we see the fruits of the efforts of Eliyahu Hanavi in our behavior very soon, and may we see the Geula Shalema, the complete redemption, speedily in our days. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Yom Tov.